Welcome, Raj. What a privilege and a pleasure to have you on board the Prestigio Leadership Forum.
We're very happy to be with you, Eduardo, and all the attendees.
We are very excited with the over 2,000 people that have connected today to our platform, and starting with your message about conscious capitalism, what's going on, and what are your call to action, your invitation to be part of this great movement. The stage is all yours.
Thank you very much.
Somos el Grupo Bolívar, una familia de más de 25.
Okay, well, again, I'm very happy to be with all of you today to share my thoughts about where are we in the conscious capitalism movement now, after about 13 years that we started in 2008. I'm getting a little echo. I'm not sure if that can be adjusted. So, as I said, I've been on the journey for about 13 years. I'm currently affiliated with Tecnológico de Monterrey in Mexico, and of course, co-founder and co-chair of Conscious Capitalism as well. Just to give you a little bit of my journey in this arena, I've been a business professor for about 35 years or so, 36 years actually. And for the first 20 years, I was operating in a more, I would say, traditional paradigm. That all changed around 2005 when I started the research for a book that initially was called In Search of Marketing Excellence, but eventually became Firms of Endearment. I was looking to see which companies are loved by their customers, but they don't spend so much money on marketing. And I actually found a group of companies that are not only loved by customers, but loved by employees, communities, suppliers, etc. So they were very stakeholder oriented. And I found that what made them different was that they had a sense of purpose. They had a reason for being. And then their leaders were different, and then they had a culture that was rooted in trust and caring. So we kind of discovered the principles or pillars of what we call conscious capitalism through that research. And we found at the end of that research, finding these companies that are loved by all their stakeholders, is that when we did the financial analysis, we found that they outperformed the market by a 9-to-1 ratio, even as they were creating many other kinds of wealth and value. So we said, this is a whole different story and paradigm of business. I got together with John Mackey of Whole Foods, and we decided to launch the movement in 2008. And the movement has grown substantially now. It's in about 20 countries, many Latin countries, as I will talk about, and about 50 US cities. My research continued looking at, for example, the impact of the rise of feminine values and having more feminine energy in leadership, and how important that is to build a conscious company. Also, a book called Everybody Matters that looked at how these ideas apply in a very different context, small manufacturing companies in the industrial Midwest of the United States as well as in Europe, and seeing how putting people at the center and having a purpose rooted in caring for people actually transform the business quite dramatically. And then increasingly, we are moving into a world where more and more people understand what is conscious capitalism, why do we need it, and more the question now is, how do we do it? So this book was intended to address that question. It's the field guide, Tools for Transforming the Organization. And my most recent work in this area is called the Healing Organization. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. The idea that business actually can play a much deeper and more profound role in our lives, where it can actually be a source of healing for people who work in companies, a force for healing actually in society. So we can actually have a much bigger impact than we realize. So if I define my purpose on this journey, which I really discovered my purpose in the process of writing Firms of Endearment, it is to bring heart, healing, and soul to business and leadership so we can build a better world for all. And I think everybody listening to me today, everybody in this event is aligned in some way with this particular purpose. As I was thinking about this talk, and I said, okay, let me just step back and say, what have I learned now? I've been researching in this area for about 15, 16 years, and I've written 5 or 6 books and have spoken about it and met lots of great leaders. What have I learned? And I tried to distill it down to 10, and I think these are the sort of summary points of that. First of all, that the cause and the solution to many of the world's problems is capitalism. Capitalism has done a lot for humanity, but we've also had many so-called side effects or externalities that are now threatening to overwhelm us, right? So that has led to the challenges that we face in terms of the environment and climate change and species extinction, and also things like income inequality and so forth, right? So the way in which we have pursued capitalism has created wealth, but has also created some problems. The solution to that is not to get rid of capitalism, it's actually to evolve capitalism. That is the only answer. We cannot do it in any other system. Governments cannot address these challenges by themselves. It really has to come from a transformation of business. I've also come to a simple but I believe profound realization that we are all here in this life as human beings to evolve ourselves and to take care of each other. That is our primary function. That is the source of deepest satisfaction for human beings. Business is how we can do that at scale. In our normal life, you can only impact a handful of people. You start a company, you can impact many more. And again, as I said, that is our deepest purpose, and that is the source of the deepest satisfaction. I've also come to learn and understand and believe that companies that are rooted in love are stronger and more successful, not companies that are operating on fear and greed and some of the other drives that we have had many businesses operate with. So enduring companies, companies that are loved, are also enduring companies. They're the ones that will survive, recessions and pandemics and all other kinds of external challenges that inevitably come. The companies that make it through and become stronger are the ones that are truly loved and actually have a strong mutual relationship with all of their stakeholders. Also, that the way we lead impacts the way people live. As a leader, it's not just about achieving results, it's about impacting how people live and what happens to their children and their family. So it's a much deeper responsibility. I've also come to believe that business is fundamentally about healing. So when we take care of each other, we meet each other's needs, we understand our needs deeply, and then we fulfill those needs through a business, whether I'm an employee or a customer or an investor or a community member. What I do through that is I reduce your suffering in that arena, and I bring more joy, and I promote healthy growth. And that's how I define healing. That business done right actually improves people's well-being, sense of joy, reduces their suffering. Business done with a traditional lens and paradigm actually can result in more suffering. We have high levels of stress. We have heart attacks that are 20% higher on Mondays. There's many indicators that business is causing a lot of stress. 600,000 Chinese people die every year from the stress connected to work. So businesses need to be places of healing for those who work there, sources of healing for those we serve, and a force for healing in society. But as a leader, you have to recognize that before you can heal the organization that you lead, you actually also have to heal yourself. That unhealed leaders will end up inflicting suffering. And the fact is, all of us need healing. Life is difficult and we all actually carry significant trauma. We are all in some state of post-traumatic stress injury. And you have to work on healing yourself before you can actually have a positive impact in the world. And the strongest force in the planet, in the universe, really is love. And human beings expressing caring is really the fundamental element of this. But so many of us never get the opportunity in our organizations to express that caring. So I believe that love that is not expressed, the most abundant resource on this planet is unexpressed human caring. Love that is not expressed is like you write a check to somebody for $1 million and they never cash it. It doesn't do any good for anybody. So love has to be expressed, and it can be expressed in a dramatic way through business. And finally, as the title of one of my books is Everybody Matters. We have to do business in a way that everybody matters, from the CEO down to the part-time worker in the front line of the organization. Everybody matters and everybody needs to win. The way we have done business, we have too many losers, a few winners and too many losers. That needs to change. So that's kind of a summary of what I've learned. Let me just step back and share some more general ideas about capitalism and why we have been on this journey. We all recognize that capitalism has done a lot for humanity. We need to appreciate that. Per capita incomes have risen 1,500% in the last 2 centuries. Life expectancy has more than doubled. Literacy has gone dramatically from 12% to 88%. I mean, there's so many factors, right? But so we need to recognize that. Otherwise, we have a danger in today's environment that if we don't appreciate what capitalism has done, we can actually lose the benefits of that. So we start with the recognition that business as an idea, business as an institution that is a part of the creation from capitalism is fundamentally good, because if you don't create value, you don't survive, right? So businesses are good because they are about creating value for customers, employees, suppliers and investors and others. Fundamentally, business is also ethical because it's based on voluntary exchange. We don't force people to work or to buy or to invest or to supply to us, right? So if they're better off, will they do that? Business is also noble because it elevates our existence. It allows us to live more fully what I call human lives, as opposed to for most of human history until 200 years ago, 95% of people were struggling just to stay alive, just to survive. Right? Now it enables us to actually experience what it means to be a human being. And business is also heroic because it lifts people out of poverty. Billions of people have been lifted out of poverty. Right? We've gone from 90% of living in extreme poverty in 1800 to about less than 9% today. Right? So all of this is because of the spread of free market capitalism in businesses. We also need to be aware and recognize and acknowledge that business is suffering from a crisis of confidence around the world. Many people have seen the downsides of business as well. And so there's a high level of cynicism and distrust, and you see it all over the world. And I think you see a lot of it in Latin America, right? You see it in Chile and Bolivia and Colombia and and many other countries where there's this rise of populist sentiments and people feeling that they're being left out of this. There's a increasing income equality, Chile being a very extreme example of that. Right. So we need to recognize that something is wrong. People are unhappy, and many young people are starting to embrace ideas like socialism, which we know doesn't work. So we have to also then understand where did we go wrong. And I think the answer to me is pretty simple: is this one idea that business is only about profits. And when you do that and you put shareholders at the center of every single decision, you end up making decisions that always favor them in the short term and inflict a cost on others. And the fact is, if you look at the overall performance of companies since shareholder value became the dominant paradigm, it's actually gone down quite significantly, return on assets, right? So shareholder value theory is not making more money. It doesn't result in more financial wealth, and it actually creates many negative impacts on people's emotional and physical and psychological and spiritual and ecological well-being in the world. So that's really the thrust, the reason behind all of the rethinking that has been underway. 2019 was a bit of a tipping point year when we had the Business Roundtable issue its statement, revised purpose of business. You have lots of different people. There are so many books now and think tanks, and everybody is saying, yeah, we need to evolve capitalism, right? We need a new story of business. It can't be the same old story that we've been enacting for the last 100 years at least. So we need to celebrate capitalism, recognize what it does and what it can do, but also we need to elevate it. If we don't do that, we will decimate it. It will go away, right? So in that sense, I believe it's time for us as businesses and business leaders that we need to wake up, right? And we need to, awaken our consciousness in a way and see the big picture in the world of what's really happening. It's not just about our results and our profits and so forth. It's really about what's going on in the world. So we need to wake up, and in a sense, we need to grow up and show up. We have to be now not just about what is good for us and how we can improve our business, but also what does the world need? What do human beings need? What does life need? What are we being called to do, right? So how do we engage with the biggest challenges? And we do that through our actions as businesses, but also in alignment with civil society and government. We need to create a vision for a conscious society. And business, I believe, needs to take the lead in that. Business is the largest and most effective actor in most countries around the world. Business can have a dramatic impact if we change the way we think. What we certainly know is business as usual is not an option. We can't continue the old way, right? We need to rethink every aspect of this. Why do we exist as a company? What do we do? Who are we as leaders? How do we operate in our cultures? What is our time horizon? How do we define success, right? And that's where conscious capitalism comes in, where we have a different answer to each of those questions: why, what, who, and how. It's not just profits; it's higher purpose, right? It's about creating value for all stakeholders, not just shareholders. It's about leaders who are taking people to a better place and creating a better future for them, not just achieving the business numbers. And it's about workplaces that feel full of inspiration and purpose and caring and trust, as opposed to simply just focusing on productivity and performance. And for each of these, I use an acronym, which we won't get into today, but that defines the qualities of that. I did want to talk a little more about leadership, because this is ultimately what makes all the difference, right? This is what drives all the changes that we need. Leadership matters so much. It has always mattered. I believe it matters even more today, because people are incredibly capable. People are more intelligent, more educated, more resourceful, have access to incredible technologies. The potential to do things is so extraordinary in the world today, but none of that happens without leadership. Right? So we need leaders to harness and channel all of that energy into addressing the significant challenges that we face. So, better leaders actually make for a better world. And by the same token, bad leaders can destroy so much that has been created. So conscious leaders, they lead from the inside out. They know who they are, and they're operating from that place of authenticity. They genuinely and deeply care about all the lives that they touch and making sure that they have a positive impact. They're deeply purpose driven. They create an inspiring vision for the organization. They are embodiments of the cultural values of the company. They are always learning and evolving themselves as human beings. And this is a critical thing for leaders to recognize. If you get stuck, your company gets stuck. So you have to continually evolve and deepen your consciousness. And of course, you have to do the right things for the right reasons. Right? You can't say I want to embrace conscious capitalism because it makes more money. No, you do it because it's the right thing for people and the planet and for life. And when you do it from that place, you will actually be more successful as well. But if you do it just to make more money, I can guarantee you it will not work. And very importantly, conscious leaders have to hold what we call triple vision, which is that you have to work on yourself, you have to heal yourself, heal me, so that you can serve we, the collective around us, and ultimately impact the world. Right? So hold triple vision at all times. Everything that you do, say, okay, how does this impact at all these levels? And the more impact we seek to have in the world, the bigger the impact we want to have there, the more we have to work on ourselves. The deeper. It's like building a skyscraper, a tall building, right? You have to build a deeper foundation the taller you want to go. So again, the more ambition we have to make an impact in the world, the more we have to work on ourselves, understanding ourselves, knowing ourselves, healing ourselves, and evolving ourselves as we go. And the goal ultimately in our leadership journey is full alignment between what we say, who we are, what we're about, what our purpose is, all of our actions, everything, all should be fully aligned. There should be no difference between who I am at work, who I am at home, right? Everything is consistent and aligned. That's how we get there. I am speaking to a largely Latin audience today, and it's been my pleasure to work a great deal in Latin America. I'm currently based in Mexico, the Technological de Monterrey. I've done a lot of work in Brazil. We have a wonderful chapter there. We have a great chapter in Chile. We have a lot of activity in Colombia, Costa Rica. Starting to have in Ecuador and Panama, and a number of other countries, Spain and Portugal, as well, the Latin part of the world. And I do believe that this is a very special region, and there's a lot that it has to offer, and in fact is a steward for. And the two things that I have come away with in terms of my experience of Latin America is that, first of all, it does have a lot of what I call mother energy. I mean, the cultures are still somewhat macho, but there's a lot of heart, there's a lot of love, there's a lot of family feeling, right? And I believe this idea of mother energy, which I was told by a coach, by the way, when I turned 60 in 2018, and I told her my life story. She said, "You realize that you were, for 45 years of your life, you were trying to impress your father, but the last 15 years, you have been honoring your mother with your work." So I believe all of this work, conscious capitalism and Shakti leadership and healing organization, is bringing my mother embodied unconditional love, compassion, empathy, inclusiveness. I think that is what the world is lacking. And I think that, to me, explains in part why conscious capitalism is embraced so much in Latin America, because it's a heart-based message. It brings in the heart and the soul. I've learned a great deal from my Latin colleagues. I've also learned a great deal from visiting some of the indigenous people in the Amazon, in Ecuador, the Achuar and the Zapara, right? And understanding, again, our connection to nature, right? So it's about Mother Earth and understanding that we don't come into this world, we come out of this world. We are as much a creation of this world as a tree is. And yet we hold ourselves separate, and therefore we treat the environment and nature as objects that we can exploit, right, for our benefit. The fact is, we are hurting ourselves because we are part of that, right? So that recognition, and I think Latin America is the steward for some of the most important natural resources, certainly the rainforest, that actually enables all life to flourish on this planet. So I think there is a very special role and responsibility that we have in Latin America as a result of that. Of course, we all have been experiencing this pandemic for the last 18 months or so, and there are lots of lessons we have all learned through that process. And I think we're going to continue to learn that. And I think part of it, what it has shown us, is that a lot of what we thought was true is actually not true, right? A lot of our assumptions and beliefs were incorrect. And we have to challenge dogmas, right? We thought it takes a long time for certain changes to happen. Or we thought that work at home is not feasible. Actually, it is feasible for lots of people, right? We thought that we could not cooperate with others to the extent that we have cooperated, right? So there are many other, we have pivoted. Many companies have pivoted and started doing different things. So we have to challenge dogma. We always have to do this, but especially now, this has brought home. In a way, we were put in a kind of timeout by Mother Nature, right? Think, what you're supposed to do when you're in timeout is think about what you've been doing and how to change it, right? What needs to change. So we have to challenge dogma. But ultimately, to me, it reminds us that it's ultimately about human flourishing and planetary flourishing of life, and that's what I think. The conscious businesses all did that. They put people at the center, and they did everything possible to protect people and the families in this process. So as we come out of this, and it does feel like we're gradually emerging from this, um, we know that the new normal cannot be the old normal, right? And what we have to do in this new normal that we create in the world, the new way of being, first of all, we have to build more resilient companies. A lot of companies that were simply not designed to survive this kind of disruption. They had very weak balance sheets. They had not really planned for these kinds of events. So it's like you're building back after an earthquake. You're going to build a building that is actually able to sustain or survive the next even bigger earthquake. We have to retain and build on the lessons learned on the pandemic, as I talked about some of those, the ability to pivot, the ability to cooperate, and we have to end the caste system within companies. As I said, there are too many losers and a few winners, right? Part-time employees, hourly employees, frontline employees, blue-collar workers, etc., all have suffered, and we call them essential workers during this pandemic. But the fact is, they have been treated as not anything but essential historically, and their lives are really, really difficult. And if we don't address that, then we are really fundamentally failing our responsibilities as leaders, but we're also endangering the survival of this whole system of free enterprise, because there will be revolts. Venezuela is kind of a warning, I think, for a lot of us. So fundamentally, what that means is we have to create better jobs. What we're seeing in the US is an interesting phenomenon that more people are quitting their work, leaving their old jobs and their old professions than ever before. Why? Because they had terrible jobs, but they thought they didn't have a choice. And now that they've had time to reflect on this and step back, more people are saying, I want meaning, I want purpose, I want respect, I want dignity, I want to be able to earn enough money to look after my family. So what we need to do is create better jobs. Good jobs are so important in people's lives. There's a wonderful book called The Good Job Strategy by Zeynep Ton. One of the companies I wrote about, HEB in Texas, a retailer, grocery retailer, their chairman said to their executives, please pay our people as much as possible, not as little as possible. Design the business model around the idea that we should pay the people as much as possible and not minimize it as a cost, so that they're able to lead decent lives. Companies are starting to make commitments that are bold, but they're also reasonable. So Bank of America by this year will raise their minimum wage to $20 in the company. The federal minimum wage is only $7 in the US, right? These are things that can be done. You can design business models that will sustain the business at wages that actually enable people to live. And then, of course, you have to provide a pathway upwards for low-wage workers. Nobody should be stuck in a low-wage job forever, even though some people may have to start out there. And we should work with governments and align what's good for business is good for society, right? It has to start with what is good for society, and then we make sure that we're part of that. So the public policies that we should seek to impact should not just be driven purely by narrow self-interest, what is good for me, but actually what's going to create a healthier, more healed society. And I believe we should commit to becoming a healing organization, as I wrote about in the book. This was a fortune cookie I received at a Chinese restaurant when I started that project, that there are many ways you can be hurtful, but there's only one way to heal, and that is through love. So we have to bring love at the core of everything that we do. And in our book, at the end, we suggest, just like doctors have to take a Hippocratic oath, that all leaders should take a healing oath. And it goes something like this: primum non nocere in Latin, which means in English, first do no harm. I will operate my business in a way that causes no harm to others or to Mother Earth. Malus eradicare, root out evil. I will never enable or collude with abuse or exploitation. I will stand up for fairness, truth, beauty, integrity, and basic goodness. Amor vincit omnia, which means love conquers all. I will operate from love and always measure success by the abundance and joy and fulfillment I generate for all those whose lives I touch. If we can, all of us, commit to these kinds of principles in our lives, in our leadership, the world will change dramatically. So to conclude, humanity is one spirit. We're all interconnected. We're all interdependent. Doesn't matter. I'm from India. You're in Latin America. We're all ultimately the same. Our natural resources we know are finite, and we're starting to run into those limits now. We have acted as though they were infinite. But what we do know is that our inner capacities as human beings are infinite. There is no limit to what human beings are capable of. But we have to create the conditions in which the extraordinary seed can flourish. The soil has to be changed and has to become, it has to enable flourishing to happen for human beings to express themselves in the way that they are capable of. So the opportunity that we have, in my friend Lynn Twist's words, those of us who are alive today can choose to lead the most meaningful lives human beings have ever led. Our challenges are greater than ever. We've never faced existential threats like we do today, but so is our ability to do something about it. Right? As I said, we've never been more intelligent, more educated, more resourceful, have more amazing technology. All of the solutions are out there. The future is already here. We just have to scale those solutions and continue to evolve those solutions. So this is the journey that we are all on. And I invite you to consider this today as to be your wake-up call. That this is how we are going to change the world for the better through business.
Thank you very much. Really, so much content, so much love, so much invitation in just a few minutes. The challenge is huge. Let me go a step backwards. When you started talking about the rise of populism and the challenges in the public sector, I sort of became aware that we have divided the challenges in our lives artificially into public sector, private sector, and maybe even personal life. And what you're doing is you're communicating those three areas fluently and dramatically, starting with healing yourself, being a better person, loving better, and that would go to the other two sectors, which raises the question is, shouldn't we create the conscious government movement
Yeah.
to make everything really converge?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the common thread here is consciousness, and we need that in every sphere of life. Doesn't matter what you do, you have to do it with higher consciousness, which means you have to have a sense of purpose. You have to understand your impact on others. You have to lead yourself before you can lead them, right? And you have to create environments where people can flourish. So I think all of that certainly applies. Government is interesting. It's supposed to be public service, and people who go into that are supposed to be almost by definition public spirited. But as has happened in business as well, we have gone down this path where everything has become about power and money. And people see government also. I know in India, where I come from, government jobs and elected jobs are seen not as a vehicle for service, but as a way to exercise power. So we have a corrupt relationship with power. We need power to make anything happen in this world. But what we have to do is make sure that we have moral courage and we're using that power in a way to impact lives in a positive direction. And we're not using it to fulfill our own personal ambitions. And it's not rooted in ego and greed and so forth, right? A leader who leads with that orientation, where they see other people are there for their achieving their own success, that's not a leader, that's a tyrant. And so I think that's what unfortunately we've had. So we need to inculcate from an early age in our education systems the idea of increasing or elevating our consciousness. And then if you choose to go into government, you choose to go into business, or you choose to go into civil society, education, universities, doesn't matter what it is, you will then operate in a way that actually is healing to yourself and to the world. So I completely agree. I think all sectors need this. And when you do that, then you have the opportunity to cooperate. Otherwise, in many countries, government and business are kind of seen as adversaries almost, right? You have to, fight each other in some way. It doesn't have to be. We're all ultimately human beings involved in trying to improve lives for each other. How do we do that best? We do it best together with consciousness.
Two challenges we have with your proposal is, first, we need companies and societies to say, okay, I want to go there. So the buy-in. And then the second one is the journey. How do we get there?
Yeah.
In the
Yeah.
first challenge, what are the obstacles? What are the reasons you find companies don't want to get into that journey?
Well, even not just companies. I talk about societies, governments, etc. I think it's part of it is mental models that we have
Yeah.
from the past, what we have been taught in business school. If you went to business school, we're still teaching that in many business schools. Or what you learned if you're in a family business from your father, which might be older ideas around what business is about, etc. So we're all kind of stuck in a paradigm and a mental trap in a way about what business is supposed to be about, and it's a very selfish and narrow way to think about business. So we need to actually unlearn in order
Yes.
to relearn some of these ideas. We also need some level of awakening of our consciousness, and I think we have to also bring in more feminine energy into leadership and into our own. We have to awaken our own feminine energy. It doesn't matter if you're male or female. In society, we have systematically suppressed the feminine energy in everybody, including in women, when they come into leadership roles, right? So we have to awaken all of that. And I think one of the ways, the methodologies that I have seen to accomplish a lot of these, there's a thing called appreciative inquiry that my friend David Cooper-Ryder has developed at Case Western. And they have the Center for Business as an Agent of World Benefit. And appreciative inquiry brings the whole system into the room. Right? So if you do it at a country level or a city level, we'd actually have the government, the mayor, the governor, the president, and we would have business leaders, and we would have civil society. Everybody's together, and it starts with dreaming. It starts with creating a vision, right? What do we envision? What is possible? And then how do we get there, right? So again, I think it's collective dreaming. One of the things I learned from the indigenous people in Ecuador is that the world is as you dream it. Everything you look around, wherever you happen to be today, you look around, anything that is not part of nature existed in somebody's mind before it existed in the physical plane. And if we're not happy with the world we are seeing around us, that means we need to dream a better dream, right? So we have to collectively dream a more beautiful dream of what is possible. And I think that's where visioning and these kinds of exercises in a collective setting come together, because together we can create an extraordinary vision of what is possible, and then we can actually build that dream and make it a reality.
I love this idea of collective dreaming, collective dreaming. Um, in the second challenge, the personal journey, and maybe for the whole idea, how do we deal with human nature that have jealousy and envies and
Yeah.
ego and the search for power? Aren't we trying to go too much against human nature, or is that possible, as you say, through
Yeah.
education?
It is, human nature is interesting blend of contradictions, right? We have the better angels of our nature, the higher side of us, and then we also have the other side that's rooted in fear, that's rooted in some of those other emotions that you mentioned, right? Jealousy and greed and so forth. Now, where do the negative ones come from? We're not born like that. We learn those things, and that actually comes from our socialization, but also comes from experiences that we had as a child. As I said earlier, we all have some degree of trauma. There is trauma, I can guarantee you, in every single person. I know in my life I've had a lot of trauma. And I just wrote a book, actually, just finishing a book now. It's looking at my own life journey and understanding that I need to heal from those traumas. I need to figure out how to heal from those traumas. Otherwise, what happens is that I become reactive, right? And when something happens, you react in a way that can be negative, because it's triggering something inside you, some kind of deep-seated fear. So the choice that we have is either we can do what we all normally do, which is we conceal it, whatever our traumas are, whatever difficulties we had, and then we numb it. A lot of people use alcohol and drugs and so forth not to deal with their own inner demons in a way, and then they have to repeat it. They relive it. It happens constantly. It keeps coming back over and over and over again in their life. That's one pathway to go down, right? In the short term, it might feel good, but in the long term, it doesn't create any positive impact. The other pathway you can say is that actually I'm going to address this head on. As James Baldwin said, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. So how do we face this? We have to reveal it to ourselves and to others, ideally. And then we have to feel it. You have to actually feel whatever caused that trauma, feel your feelings in order to heal it. right? And ultimately, it is possible to heal, and there are many modalities, right? Some of the healing I experienced in the rainforest with the shamans there. I mean, there's many, many ways that we have in the world available to us to heal. And once you do that, you can experience, we can all experience what is now being called post-traumatic growth, right? This post-traumatic stress injury or disorder, but actually we can emerge from that stronger than if we never had the trauma to begin with. So the possibility, every one of us has trauma. You can use it as some kind of a, as a fertilizer or a fuel almost to actually create a stronger version of yourself. So I do believe that all of us as leaders can go on that journey. This is increasingly what we are doing with leaders, is helping them recognize these things and heal from these things so that they are no longer reactive in life. They are coming from a place of creativity and caring in all the decisions that they make.
That's a very good way to finish our session. Yesterday, Tal Ben Shahar talked us about this post-traumatic growth, and certainly, I think you've gone through a fertile life and transformed your experiences into a very fertile proposal: the conscious capitalism, the conscious society, and we're all ready to work on it from here onwards. Thank you very, very much for your participation in the forum.
Thank you, Eduardo. I was really delighted to be with you today.